thank you for showing that. I also wanted to, I was watching the bits and pieces of this, and I was thinking how excited I was that the Andersons took my dad in from the wild and gave him a job. It's pretty interesting to think that it started right here, started in the attic, started in the basement, what have you. And I went through my basement really quickly before I came over here for about 3 minutes, and I was throwing some photos and gear in a tub to come over as props, like Carrot Top might do a bit and pull out comedy pieces. But it's incredible, the history, and for me, I was aching to do this, kind of capture that history in this film. You know, I've been flipping through these National Geographics, and the bits and pieces aren't all there. I say that in the movie, but you're walking down the hall, and there's this familial element. I didn't expect the familial element or my part to be so big in this film. In fact, I fought that, like putting a cat in a bath. I'm still mad at the director for doing that, Eric Becker, but I gotta say Eric Becker did an incredible job with this film. But by braiding this West Seattle history, Seattle music history, and making it relevant and connecting the past to the present and hopefully the future. So for me, this film really embodies a lot of that. It's pretty incredible. And I will give you one little spoiler alert. We do drop Chris in a crevasse up on the mountain, which is kind of exciting because in 1965, Dad dropped Bobby Kennedy in a crevasse up on the mountain. And that actually made it into the paper. There's a story about it, dropped him in waist deep or something like that. Well, we got Chris on film going straight into a crevasse, and I end up being the guy that popped him out of the edge. So we like to say every 50 years we like to drop a Kennedy in a crevasse.
We can.
Yeah, right. He was fine. It was good though. Let him straight into it. But I don't have a prepared speech except that it's sort of ingrained in me, this whole history, and so I'd like to have a little back and forth, a little Q&A. I did bring a couple props, and since this beautiful this beautiful company started with an ice axe, I brought an old ice axe out of my dad's basement. This is a shorty. It's not the tall one that you see in the photo there. And Dad had a habit of carving his initials and everything. If you look at this photo really closely, you'll see a JW up on top of the ice axe. This is in fact it's not an Austrian one, it's a knockoff, and this is one of the cheaper ones that they were trying to avoid having to pay too much money for. That axe in that photo is a French axe that they were buying, and the ice axes they used in '65 on Kennedy was a French ice axe. So I have a little bit of a fetish for the gear, probably because of growing up with it spread around the house and whatnot. So one of the exciting things for me on this climb was reaching out to sponsors. So for example, Rainier Beer sponsored part of this film. Well, Rainier Beer used to sponsor was at base camp on the 63 Everest climb. My father was the equipment manager of that climb, and they had cases of Rainier they brought in, and they caught the German team drinking their beer, and it almost had a little bit of a knockdown drag out at base camp at Rainier. So we got Rainier to donate to this film a little bit. Simone Ice Axe, Simone Climbing Gear Company gave us crampons and ice axes, and that's the same company that is my father's holding the ice axe there, and you see Bobby Kennedy on the summit of Mount Kennedy with the same ice axe. We also got Varney sunglasses to donate. We've got Outdoor Research to donate, which is another great Seattle startup company. And we had Sub Pop Records. So people might not have been aware that there's this huge music element and a little edgy Seattle grunge story there, which is something I brought to the party. We also, a good friend of mine, Eddie Vedder, is in the film from Pearl Jam, and he brought 5 original songs to the film. And some of that bass harmonica, that last scene you just saw where they get out of the aircraft, and Chris Kennedy goes, "I've never felt so alone," and there's that weird, deep, it's a bass harmonica that Vedder played, and actually recorded all of this in West Seattle. And I'm in talks right now with Sub Pop Records to do a soundtrack for the film, and that makes me really excited. It's not so much a moneymaker, but these days where people download records, but I'm excited to make a soundtrack for the film and have all this music available to the public as well. Any questions? You guys want to throw me some questions, or? Yeah.
A wonderful film, and what an extraordinary life you've had, being born to the family that you were.
Yeah.
And I love that you use those experiences to give back in your way, find a way for you to make a difference in your
Yeah.
Eastern Washington Trail.
Yeah.
Because we have a 15-year-old daughter, and the only way she's gonna know to have a baseline for the outdoors is to do these, go
Yeah.
out and experience the world. And
Yeah.
so I
Thank you.
think that's marvelous.
So yeah, that trail project in particular for me, I've been working on that for 12 years or so, and we're going for our phase grant. We're going to present a grant application in Olympia on the 15th of August for phase 5, which is going to finish that trail. And we've created this beautiful thing, 15 miles of waterfront where there was all private land before. So we've connected 2 school complexes and 4 towns in extremely rural America, in Northeast Washington, where you couldn't send your kid to school on a bicycle or send them to school walking if you lived a half a mile from the school, because we have 30-ton work trucks and logging trucks on our roads. Something I didn't realize when I got into it, but all of a sudden there's all this beauty. It's a near wilderness trail that connects all these communities. That's really, really incredible. And so I've branched out a little bit from that. I've grown my mission to include wilderness, and I'm working with Washington Trails Association now, which is a great community. They do a ton of trail work and preservation and conservation in Washington State. So I'm a Northeast Washington outreach person for those guys. Go to a lot of meetings with commissioners and whatnot, advocate for, and working with the logging community, mining community, and trying so we can have it all, get some recreational opportunities going for the recreational economy, grow that for the towns. We don't necessarily want to be like Leavenworth. I don't want to have to make them dress like a German or anything. But
Our
yes.
world needs more of that.
My question's about the trail too.
Oh.
And I want to say it's a lovely trail, and I rode on it last summer
Oh,
with the group from the Cascade Bicycle Club.
oh, great, yeah. Thank you for coming.
My understanding is that the trail is non-motorized only, and this was kind of an issue. I'm wondering if you have any insights as to how that played out. I think it was approved as non-motorized by a referendum or a general vote. Anyhow,
So,
how do you handle
something
the
I learned from my
politics?
father is that there's no bad people. You just got to educate them. So people were coming out in force to motorize the trail, and I was explaining to them that the funds to develop the trail make it nice for vault toilets, parking lots, kiosks, surfacing, crushed rock, bridges, railings, things of that nature all come from the non-motorized funds, basically. So to do that was going to create a long, skinny park that was unfunded. So it would have just defaulted to a ATV trail. And that we were trying to do something different. We're trying to connect the community and get people healthy. Also, Ferry County is extreme rural. There's high unemployment. We're also listed as one of the highest, one of the least healthy counties in Washington State. And part of that is because we don't have, you think you're out in the middle of nowhere. You've got the Kettle Crest Trail, which is a part of the Pacific Northwest Trail, congressionally recognized trail. It's gorgeous. There's tons of recreational opportunities. You could not walk to school, and so. In doing this, there's money allocated for this, so explaining that to the community over and over again is what that took. And we finally forced it to a vote. So we had some commissioners that were really fighting it. We finally put it to a vote, and we came back with a 61% in favor of non-motorized, supermajority. So that was pretty helpful. And since then, we've had help from the National Parks, Rivers, and Trails Assistance Planning Program. Also, recently, we're a broke county. We don't have a parks department. We just have guys like me and a couple other flunkies. Actually, the Rails to Trails Conservancy referred to our group as the Bad News Bears of trail groups because we've been pretty tenacious. These grants often require a match, and recently, in Olympia, they just moved the match requirement for counties that are challenged as ours from 50% match requirement to 10% match requirement. So now we can really do a lot. I wish they did that about 5 years ago when we were really cool. But now with this last grant, we had the Governor Jay Inslee come out to the trail and visit to see, because we're now the poster child for great rural trails and doing good things with their grants. And everyone's been very impressed with the trail. So it's called the Ferry County Rail Trail. It's ferrycountyrailtrail.com. And yeah, I love it. And I've worked on it forever for free. And it's, I just, you know, if I didn't have to pay property tax, I would just do that all the time. But yeah.
Bobby, I have a question about the film. There were 2 screenings at Seattle International Film Festival, both lines around the block, people hanging out after the films. Is it true that the next screening that people would have an opportunity to see it would be the wonderful little Port Townsend Film Festival?
Correct, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry. We're doing this month in Aspen, Colorado.
Oh, okay.
Sorry, but then Port Townsend. We're excited about that because my father lives in Port Townsend now. My father and Diana live in Port Townsend.
And so that'll be when? Do you know?
Oh gosh,
It's like
hoping you know.
Yeah, September. I
want to say it's
September.
I want to say it's 22nd or something like that, or 25th or something like that.
3rd weekend of September.
Thank you.
I'm from Port Townsend.
Perfect. I want to bring it back a little bit to the REI thing, which is so I don't know where to start or stop with this. It's pretty crazy, but you know, my father put out a book, and I haven't read it in a long time. But the familial stuff, the stories that I always heard, that I always latched onto and got excited about, were that my father had to argue with the board to create the first satellite store. So he opened up the first franchise store. I think it was Oakland or Berkeley, sorry, in California. And so
a lot of people think that's the first store now.
Yeah.
Which weirdly, yeah.
No, this is.
I know that.
And I can remember being just a tiny little kid and like, why in the hell are people camping on the sidewalk at my dad's work in the all night long or in the morning or for days before Monday? And Dad was like, oh, we have a big sale once a year and people come from Colorado and they come from California and so Dad had to argue with the board. The board was like, no, you're going to destroy our company. And now I think you have 150 stores roughly, or
a bit more, about 156.
Didn't mean to short you. So that's incredible, and
I always forget that number.
I hope you keep that momentum because REI really takes this to the people, and it's to go to New York and see all the different people visiting that store. I don't know if that's a flagship store as well, but it's a gorgeous store, and to see all the people that come from overseas. You know, everyone goes to the Big Apple. Everyone hits that store, and you have every walk of life in there buying gear. It's really, really, really something.
Is it true, Alex, that a lot of the stores have the ice axe as the door handle?
All of them.
All of them.
Yeah.
And now you know the story behind that.
It's an interesting, if you don't mind my just building on that for a second,
Yeah.
it's an interesting comment you make because very often the question that people ask is, you know, this co-op that started very small, 23 friends, has grown a lot, and the question we sometimes get is, you know, why grow as a cooperative? You know, why grow? Why get bigger? Why do you need to? And this is the challenge that, and you can read in the minutes of 50 years of climbing the arguments that your dad was pushing, but the story that you're telling, Bobby, about the impact you're having even in Eastern Washington. My answer is straightforward. You know, we have a huge opportunity to introduce more people to the lifestyle that's captured so beautifully in your film, and the co-op can do that. And so one of the things that I feel very strongly when you see this film is the question, you know, what's he going to do as a community of people to continue to build on this type of stuff, and it's only because of stories like this that we had the permission to act for public lands. You know, last year we had in the industry a really challenging situation with a review of national monuments. I don't know if people are familiar with this, but there was a review of national monuments going back, 20 years. And
Bears Ears became
Bears Ears was the central hook point, but the challenge was, how do you create a conversation about this that is inclusive, not exclusive? And because of the legacy that you're part of, REI is able to pull together a coalition of 500 companies, hunting, fishing, big, small, rural, urban, to say public lands are something that everybody should have access to. It doesn't matter what your background is. And it's a non-political statement, but it is important in the kind of the context of what we care about. And so I'm interested in the comment in the film where someone says, "Hey, I think it's when he got that place in Eastern Washington." Was it when you got the place in Eastern Washington?
I think
that you got
it was sort of,
passionate?
and that was sort of. I mentioned working with REM. So I went from working with sloppy grunge bands,
Right.
and being this sort of out on a flyer of my own, to working with someone with much more civic duty, much more civic minded, maybe some more complex lyrics, and that was REM. And seeing those guys and how much they gave back to the community, and historic preservation and things of that nature. Then I was like, well, that's what my father's been doing his whole life, but it's more outdoor oriented. It's more conservation. Chris Kennedy says, everyone, or Jim Whittaker knew everyone has to get out and see the place. I'm on the front lines of extreme rural America, or extreme frontier, as some people call it. And so I'm working with logging companies, resource extraction, timber management it's called now, and mining companies who've donated to our trail. And so I'm part of a coalition of people that are trying to work together to have it all. Like, we want to have our timber industry and mining, but we need to preserve these sweet spots. And it used to be a war between environmentalists and resource extraction. All of a sudden, the environmentalists, in Ferry County in particular, in the Colville National Forest, there's a group called NewFake. It's the Northeast Washington Forestry Coalition, and I've been a member of those meetings, and I'm representing a recreational element of that. And that's sort of new. It used to just be like conservationists hacking it out with loggers. Well, those guys came to an agreement that there should be wilderness in this beautiful little cigar on this ridge here, which is now the PNT, Pacific Northwest Trail, the congressionally recognized trail. It's one of these gigantic through hiking trails, like what's the one on the Pacific Crest Trails?
Sure.
Hugely popular. Ours needs a little more development, but we like it rough in Ferry County. So, but my point is that we're kind of, all of a sudden there's this cross-pollination supporting each other's effort and supporting stakeholders, instead of just being at war,
Right.
suing timber companies for timber sales. We're now working together because the timber companies are supporting little medallions of wilderness, and it's pretty interesting to see. So the interim secretary of the Forest Service just came out, and I was in a meeting with her earlier this week, and she was like, "You guys are way ahead of the pack. This is really impressive."
That's
So
awesome.
yeah.
Well, Bobby, I want to thank you so much for letting us have you as a guest, and I think this was just perfect set at this house.
Great.
And I'm sure that you can hang around for a few more minutes in case anybody has any other questions.
I'm gonna hang around for a long time, so please. Am I getting the hook right now? That's so.
Oh.
I don't like to publicly speak very much, so I'd rather just work the room. If you guys stand outside in the fresh air, maybe have a grape if there's any left. I was gonna suggest, I don't know if you were gonna do it, but maybe we can auction off. This is a signed, beautiful color reproduction of the summit photo that Gambu took of my father on Everest 1963, and maybe we can auction it off or silent auction it today for your efforts.
That would be amazing.
I'm a big historic
Yeah.
preservation fan. My lovely better half, Aurora Bennett over here, has worked with Historic Seattle for years, and I love the work that these guys do. So I'm really excited to be here and support it, and I couldn't be happier to be a part of this.
Wow.
So
Well, what we'll do is we'll put a sheet of paper over there for
Yeah, perfect.
for auction bids. Yeah,
Oh.
and we'll figure something out in the next few minutes. I also want to say one more huge thank you to Beatrix and Greg, who
Yes.
many of you may not know, but they have been giving up their house in a big way to let everybody come here, and I am so appreciative of them. So